June 3, 2004, 6:42 p.m. Sunset Boulevard, Los Angeles. The premiere lights are already on, bleaching the sidewalk white. Camera rigs hum, publicists check watches. A black sedan idles at the curb, engine warm, door closed. Inside the theater, a reserved seat sits empty in the third row, center aisle, perfect sightline. The name card is still there. Everyone assumes the delay is minutes. It won't be. You can almost feel the tension in the way conversations stall. A producer scans the entrance again. A studio executive pretends to read a message, then pockets the phone without unlocking it. The crowd keeps smiling, but the smiles have thinned. This was the night momentum was supposed to peak, press cycle aligned, buzz calibrated, the machine ready to accelerate. And yet the person the machine was built around has chosen not to arrive. No announcement. No apology. Just a decision already made. In Hollywood, momentum is oxygen. You inhale it while it's available because the industry has taught everyone the same lesson: keep moving or be replaced. Projects stack. Meetings overlap, visibility compounds. The system rewards those who stay in motion, who answer quickly, show up often, say yes early. That's why this moment feels unsettling, not scandalous, unsettling. Because it isn't failure that keeps the seat empty, it's restraint. Somewhere else in the city, away from the flash, away from the carefully timed applause, a different calculation is happening. A quiet one, the kind that doesn't announce itself because announcing it would defeat the purpose. This is the withdrawal. The decision to reduce visibility rarely begins with exhaustion, it begins with clarity. It starts when the calendar fills itself before permission is given, when the phone rings with certainty instead of invitation, when the question is, what do you want to do next, but how soon can you do it again? Momentum at this stage stops feeling earned and starts feeling inherited. You didn't ask for it, you're expected to carry it. And that expectation weighs more than the work. Hollywood likes to call this success. Internally, it feels like compression. Time compresses, choices compress, identity compresses into what has already been proven to sell. For some, that compression becomes unbearable not because it hurts, but because it erases. The withdrawal doesn't look dramatic. There's no manifesto, no public statement about taking a break. Those come later if they come at all. The real withdrawal is procedural. Calls return slower. Meetings rescheduled without urgency. Scripts read but not pursued. Decisions delayed just long enough to be noticed. At first it looks like indecision, then it looks like leverage. Hollywood is fluent in patterns. It senses absence the way a body senses pain instinctively. The system begins to adjust not because it understands the reason, but because it must. When someone indispensable becomes intermittent, the rules bend. Psychologically, this moment is treacherous. Fame trains people to fear the pause. The longer you've been visible, the more silence feels like disappearance. There's a voice, persistent, reasonable, that whispers consequences. They'll move on, they'll forget. The moment will pass without you. The people who withdraw hear that voice too. They just hear another one underneath it, quieter, steadier, asking a different question: if I don't stop now, when will I ever be choosing again? This is where restraint becomes an act of self-preservation. Not rebellion. Not rejection. Preservation. Industry pressure doesn't always arrive as force. More often it arrives as inevitability. Schedules that assume availability, contracts that assume compliance, public narratives that assume continuity. And when someone interrupts that inevitability, politely, silently, the effect is disproportionate. Projects pause. Budgets wobble. Timelines soften. Not because anyone demanded it, but because the center of gravity shifted. Power in Hollywood has always favored presence. The withdrawal exposes a different equation. Power also lives in refusal. Back at the theater, the lights dim anyway. The program moves forward. Applause happens on cue, but the absence lingers not as scandal but as signal. People begin to ask careful questions, not out loud, never out loud. Is this temporary? Is something changing? Do we wait or do we adapt? The industry hates uncertainty more than it hates silence, and this silence is precise. What follows the withdrawal isn't chaos, it's recalibration. Studios begin offering fewer projects but with more flexibility. Negotiations reopen on terms that were once non-negotiable. Creative control, once implied, is now written down. The pause has done something unexpected. It has clarified value. By stepping back, these figures force Hollywood to articulate what it wants from them and what it's willing to give in return. That articulation changes the balance. Emotionally, the withdrawal is isolating. You trade applause for distance, validation for quiet. There are nights when the decision feels heavier than the pressure it replaced. But there's also relief. Relief in choosing when to be seen. Relief in answering to fewer voices. Relief in remembering that momentum can be managed, not just chased. This is the part no one photographs, no carpets, no headlines, just a recalibration happening off camera. The empty seat remains empty for the rest of the night. By morning, the story will be framed as scheduling, as coincidence, as timing. But timing is the point. Because this wasn't a missed appearance, it was a message delivered through absence, a declaration that momentum no longer dictates identity. And once that declaration is made, the industry can't unhear it. What happens next isn't immediate. It unfolds slowly in contracts rewritten, in careers reshaped, in influence redistributed. The pause has begun to work. And Hollywood is about to learn what it costs, and what it grants, when its most valuable figures refuse non-stop access. The morning after the premiere, the phones start ringing, but not with panic. With caution. Assistants phrase messages carefully. Executives ask questions sideways, never directly. Meetings are requested, not scheduled. Language softens, certainty dissolves into suggestion. Hollywood has noticed the pause. And now it's adjusting. Recalibration is how the industry survives disruption. When something doesn't behave the way it's supposed to, the system doesn't confront it head-on. It studies it, measures it, attempts to absorb it without acknowledging that anything changed. But something has changed. The withdrawal introduced friction into a machine designed for smooth repetition, and friction creates heat, heat creates awareness. Suddenly, assumptions are re-examined. The assumption that availability equals commitment. The assumption that momentum must always be fed. The assumption that stars need the system more than the system needs them. Those assumptions don't collapse overnight, but they loosen. Behind closed doors, conversations shift tone. Instead of asking when someone will return, executives ask how they might return. Instead of packaging projects around certainty, they build contingencies. Instead of dictating terms, they invite dialogue. This isn't generosity, it's recognition. Hollywood recalibrates around scarcity faster than it does around abundance. When something becomes less accessible, its value sharpens. By choosing privacy, these figures didn't disappear from relevance, they condensed it. Negotiations reflect this new balance. Clauses that once felt aspirational become standard, shorter commitments, longer development timelines, approval rights that protect creative integrity instead of undermining it. Not because anyone demanded special treatment, but because the pause exposed leverage that had been obscured by constant participation. When you're always present, your absence carries no threat. When you step back deliberately, your presence becomes negotiable. Psychologically, this phase is disorienting. There's no applause for recalibration, no external affirmation that the pause was wise, only subtle shifts, better terms here, more respect there, that confirm something fundamental has changed. The industry is responding differently. And that difference feeds a dangerous realization. The pressure was never entirely external. Much of it was internalized. The urgency, the fear of falling behind, the instinct to stay visible at all costs. The pause doesn't just alter Hollywood's behavior, it rewires the individual's relationship to the system. For some, this is the hardest part. Once the machine slows, you begin to feel how fast it was moving. You notice how many decisions were reflexive rather than intentional, how often momentum replaced meaning. Privacy creates space, space creates perspective. And perspective is uncomfortable. Because it reveals compromises you didn't realize you were making. Hollywood, meanwhile, continues to adjust. Projects that once relied on automatic participation now need persuasion. Roles are rewritten to entice, not just to capitalize. Studios begin to compete not just on money but on respect. The tone changes from expectation to invitation. That change is subtle, but it's power shifting hands. This recalibration doesn't happen uniformly. Some executives resist it, some attempt to wait it out, others quietly adopt it as a new strategy, recognizing that control isn't always exerted, it's sometimes conceded. The pause has taught the industry something it rarely admits. Influence doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it withholds. Emotionally, the recalibration brings calm, but also doubt. There are moments when the absence feels too long, when the silence invites speculation, when the fear of being replaced resurfaces, sharp and convincing. But each time the industry adapts instead of moves on, the fear weakens. Because replacement was never the goal. Control was. By now, the pause has done more than create space, it has rewritten expectations. Hollywood no longer assumes constant access, it plans around intention, it treats presence as a choice, not an obligation. And that changes how power is distributed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. What began as a withdrawal is becoming something else entirely, a repositioning. And the consequences of that repositioning won't be visible immediately. They'll surface later in the kinds of projects chosen, in the authority exercised behind the camera, in the legacies shaped quietly over time. The recalibration is complete. What comes next is the real test: how to re-enter without surrendering the ground gained through absence. Because returning is harder than leaving. And the moment of return is where the true balance of power is revealed. February 17, 2007, 9:03 a.m. West Hollywood. The room is smaller this time, no stage lights, no velvet ropes, just a long table, clean glasses, and a view of the city still shaking off the morning haze. The figure at the center arrives early, not to be seen but to set the tone. You can feel it before a word is spoken. This return is not an apology. It's a negotiation. Returning after a pause is the most delicate move in Hollywood. Leave too long and the industry rewrites you as nostalgia. Return too soon and the pause loses its meaning. Those who mastered this moment understood one thing clearly. Presence once reclaimed must be conditional. So they didn't come back loudly. They didn't announce reinvention. They didn't promise availability. They returned selectively. The projects chosen after a pause are rarely accidental. They are precise, engineered to communicate boundaries without explanation. Smaller casts, limited commitments, creative control written into the structure. From the outside, it looks like a preference shift. From the inside, it's a declaration: I decide how this works now. Hollywood notices. The room listens differently when someone who could have stayed away chooses to be present. Psychologically, the return tests discipline. Momentum is seductive. Old habits whisper familiar instructions: take the meetings, accept the praise, lean back into visibility. The system is ready to accelerate again, grateful, eager, almost relieved. But restraint has to survive success. That's the real challenge. Because power gained through absence can be lost through overexposure. What changes most during the return isn't workload, it's posture. Meetings slow down, conversations deepen, decisions are deferred without apology, silence becomes a tool, not a liability. When questions are asked, answers are measured. When pressure appears, it's acknowledged but not obeyed. Hollywood understands tone, it reads subtext fluently. And the subtext is unmistakable: this participation is optional. Industry dynamics shift accordingly. Studios approach with caution, not fear, respect. They know the pause wasn't accidental and they don't want to trigger another one. This awareness alters how power circulates. Creative disagreements become collaborative discussions, deadlines become flexible frameworks. The threat of replacement, once implicit, loses credibility. Because the industry has already learned that absence didn't weaken influence. It sharpened it. Emotionally, the return brings a quiet confidence. Not the confidence of dominance, but of alignment. There's relief in knowing that presence is no longer compulsory, that identity isn't dissolved by success, that momentum can be entered and exited without collapse. This is where the pause proves its worth, not as a retreat but as training. Over time, this approach spreads. Others notice, younger figures observe the pattern, agents adjust advice, executives recalibrate expectations. The idea that constant visibility is the only path to relevance begins to erode. Slowly, unevenly, irreversibly. The return doesn't just reshape one career, it introduces a new option into the system. By now, the pause has completed its arc. Withdrawal created space. Recalibration shifted power. Return established terms. But something deeper has happened beneath the surface. Hollywood has been forced to confront a truth it prefers to ignore. That momentum is not owned by the industry, it's borrowed from the individual. And individuals can reclaim it. The final impact of these pauses won't be measured in box office numbers or award tallies. It will be felt in how careers age, in how legacies settle, in who remains whole after decades in the spotlight. The return was never the end of the story. It was the proof. Proof that power, when exercised quietly, lasts longer. And that the most influential decision a star can make is not when to say yes, but when to step back and when to come back on their own terms.